morning, students. On the last turn we have completed the first life process, that was nutrition, and on the last turn I have given some of the questions. Some of the students have replied or answered me on my WhatsApp number, but the response is not very good. I will give the question after completion of every part of the chapter, and you have to try those questions, but I will not discuss the answer. I will check it on WhatsApp. Now next process that is there, that is of respiration. Respiration, the process by which digested food is oxidized to release energy, is called respiration. As you know, if we discuss about the respiration or term respiration, normal person can answer mean taking in of oxygen and releasing CO2 is called respiration. But in science or scientific study, it is a process which is mainly composed of two of the processes, and these are number one, breathing, and number two, cellular respiration. The answer that may be given by any of the person, that is taking in of oxygen, releasing carbon dioxide, that is called as breathing. So breathing, it is a process in which simply exchange of gases are take place, and these gases mean the O2 from the atmosphere can be taken in by the organism, and organism gives out CO2. So this is the process of breathing. It is a physical or mechanical process involving inhalation or exhalation, and it takes place in nasal passage to lungs. When it involves the organ in human beings, nasal passage and up to the lungs. Now respiration, or that is second part, that is cellular respiration or respiration. It is a complex process during which digested food is oxidized to release chemical energy. It is a biochemical process and takes place inside the cell. It involves a series of reactions which are catalyzed by specific enzymes, and the energy is stored in the ATP molecules, when adenosine triphosphate molecule. ATP or adenosine triphosphate, it is the energy currency of our body. It is formed in mitochondria of cell. That's why mitochondria is also called as powerhouse of the cell. Now about the cellular respiration, this cellular respiration or oxidation of foods may be categorized into two main parts. These are number one, aerobic respiration, aerobic, and number two, anaerobic. So cellular respiration, it can be categorized into two types, and these types are number one, aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, the respiration that takes place in abundance of oxygen, is aerobic respiration. When glucose molecule is broken down in cytoplasm, and during this broken down, oxygen is not required necessary, it converts into pyruvic acid, and then the reaction that takes place in presence of oxygen, in abundance of oxygen, then it takes place in mitochondria, and during this process the production of CO2 plus H2O plus a large amount of energy, about 38 ATP energy is produced. mean we can say that during cellular aerobic respiration, abundant of oxygen is required, and this reaction, first of all, glucose molecule, it broke down in this cytoplasm, and oxygen is not necessary for that. Then it converts to the pyruvic acid. Then pyruvic acid, after that the reaction takes place in mitochondria, and in presence of abundant of oxygen, it broke down into CO2 plus H2O plus 338 ATP of energy. So we see that this aerobic respiration consists of two steps. First is this reaction, mean change of glucose to pyruvic acid. This is called as glycolysis. So the conversion of glucose into pyruvate or pyruvic acid is called glycolysis. Then it occurs in cytoplasm of cell. After that, second step, that is also called as Krebs cycle. It is a process of conversion of pyruvate or pyruvic acid into CO2 plus H2O plus large amount of energy. So this reaction occurs in mitochondria. So we see aerobic respiration consists of two steps. These are glycolysis and Krebs cycle. Most of the time the question about it is asked in exam, in your board exam, what are the glycolysis and Krebs cycle. So you can easily explain on this basis that when glucose broke down into pyruvic acid, this is called as glycolysis, and when this pyruvic acid converts to CO2 plus H2O plus large amount of energy is produced, then it is called as Krebs cycle. Next respiration, that is of other type of cellular respiration, is anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration means the respiration which takes place in absence or lack of oxygen, then it is called as anaerobic respiration. During this process, this glucose molecule, how the reaction takes place in anaerobic respiration, this takes place like that. During this process, glucose molecule, it broke down in pyruvic acid, and this pyruvic acid then, in absence of oxygen, when oxygen is not present, it converts into ethyl alcohol C2H5OH plus CO2 plus H2 plus only 2 ATP of energy is produced. So we see in this process, when in anaerobic respiration, when glucose broke down in cytoplasm, this converts into pyruvic acid in absence, or the amount of oxygen is not required for that. But when this pyruvic acid in absence of oxygen, this takes place in case of microscopic organism like yeast, etc. It converts into ethyl alcohol and CO2. Beside that, a small amount of energy is produced. In human beings, sometimes during vigorous exercise, when we do running or do much of the exercise, and the oxygen of the body gets consumed faster, then it's supplied by the blood, then glucose is converted into lactic acid. The reaction that takes place, that is like there, glucose, this firstly converts to the pyruvic acid, and then in lack of oxygen, when oxygen amount of oxygen is less, lack of oxygen, it converts into lactic acid, and beside that only 2 ATP energy is produced. And the accumulation of this lactic acid causes muscular cramps. So this is all for today. On the next turn we will talk about the respiratory system in human beings. That's all.